Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to Montgomery County's Heat Watch Community Heat Mapping event. My name is Adriana Hochberg, and I'm the Climate Change Officer for Montgomery County, as well as the Acting Director in our Department of Environmental Protection. I want to thank the hundreds of volunteers who committed to making this mapping possible. This absolutely would not have been possible without the help of our street scientists who patiently waited on the weather, became trained on how to use the sensors, collected data, and are now out on the streets mapping 200 square miles of the county today. This initiative is one of the many ways that the county plans to involve the community in strengthening our resilience to climate change as part of our climate action plan. Collaboration between scientists, government, and communities at the local level is essential to our efforts to mitigate the effects of climate change. Today, we are joined by representatives from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, the NOAA Climate Program Office, and the NOAA National Weather Service. It's thanks to a grant from NOAA that our heat mapping event is taking place today. We're also joined by County Executive Mark Elridge and several county departments. In addition to the Department of Environmental Protection, we also have here the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, Montgomery Parks, the planning departments, as well as community organizations like One Montgomery Green. I want to take a moment to give a big shout out to one of my colleagues at DEP, Laura Civils, who has played an instrumental role in making this event possible in terms of coordinating all the volunteers, training, and all of the logistics involved. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our County Executive, Mark Elridge, who will make a few remarks. Mark.
Thank you. Slight height adjustment. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for putting this together. One of the things I'd like to remind people is we think mostly of the last 2.5 years as COVID in one form or another, but through all of that, departments like this were working on programs like this, that people were moving forward and trying to envision what do we deal with when we get out of COVID, and we can put our resources and our energies to something other than trying to keep everybody alive all the time. You know, what comes next? And this isn't a good example of what comes next, and you're going to see a lot of more things like this as we move forward. So I'm really excited. I'm really excited about the Heat Watch program. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when you start getting ground data. As somebody who's looked at data that's collected for a variety of purposes in the DC area, you realize that there's very little granularity to what we do. And so you can make very broad assumptions, and the location of a particular sensor for anything can misrepresent what is really the true picture. So this ability to get all of these sensors out in the community, I think, is going to be revolutionary. If there's a geek here who's into sensors, my next project, I know I've seen this, there are sensors for CO2, CO, benzene, lead, and what I want to find is let's figure out how we put together a pack of those sensors and put them out around the county. I guarantee you that the reports that we have about the quality of the air would be a lot different when you start seeing the quality of air on the ground around the county. And I think it's important that now that the technology is available, that we go into that space. None of this is science fiction, which, you know, maybe a decade or so ago we might have thought about, never at the level of somebody putting it on top of their car or in a backpack, but the world has changed. The county's done several hyperthermia alerts and heat emergency alerts. We are seeing, you know, the extremes of weather in real time in Montgomery County. And I think, you know, our goals are really aggressive for greenhouse gas emissions. We're looking at an 80% reduction by 2027 and 100 by 2035. I will not kid anybody. Those goals will be really aggressive, and there are going to be challenges because not all the technology is in place. But one thing we've learned in the 3 years, I guess, since we put together the report, that things that didn't make it into the report because they weren't commercial yet have become commercial in the last 3 years. And so there's a radically changing landscape. I had a meeting with Washington Gas. It was an hour-long meeting, and they talked about decarbonizing their gas grid and moving toward hydrogen and things that would be, you know, more friendly in the environment. And it was a conversation nobody would have had with Washington Gas probably 5 years ago. So this is, you know, the changes that are happening. I think they're going to be big for us. We've got a prohibition bill on natural gas going into the council, and hopefully if the council approves it, there won't be new natural gas hookups in the short order, which means that everything will be electric going forward, and then we'll work on doing transitions for the buildings that are currently stuck in natural gas. And I'll just say, I'm just excited about this. It's part of our climate action plan. The reliance on citizens in Montgomery County is critically important. You do so much work, and it's true during COVID. We never would have had the response we had to COVID if it hadn't been for the citizen groups around the county, and I think climate change is going to prove to be the same thing. It's going to be citizens who care about this, who are going to be the people that convince their neighbors that they need to do things in their own lives that have an impact on climate change. I just adopted a solar roof, and I can already see the benefits, and I'm going to use one of my speaking times when I speak with the public to show what my bills look like before and after, because we need people to make this transition. Government can't do it unless people in the community follow. So thank you for everything you're doing on the data side. Thank you for everything you do on the policy side. I'm just happy to be here and looking forward to seeing what the data tells us. Thank you.
Pull this back down. Thank you, Mark. Ken Graham is a director of the National Weather Service and previously served as a director of NOAA's National Hurricane Center. His tireless energy to build effective partnerships at all levels of government and his close work with emergency managers helps our country get prepared for hazardous weather. Ken.
Thank goodness for adjustable microphones, so it's just been wonderful. So thank you all for being here. It's just absolutely an honor to be here and talk to everybody today. There's going to be few people that can come up here in meteorology and say one of the reasons I became a meteorologist, partly because of urban heat island. Let me explain. So part of it was there was a big flood when I was evacuated as a kid. It got me into meteorology about 6 years old. But I remember growing up in Phoenix, having the windows down, driving around, and there were points where you felt the temperature cooler and warmer. And think about being 6 or 7 years old. I'm like, what is that? And there was a day that outside of that heat island, I had my dad turn around. We drove back, got warmer by 5-10 degrees, and got cooler by 5-10 degrees. I experienced it. It's real. It's absolutely amazing. And I was always curious about that part of the science. So thank you. So for the past 6 years, NOAA's been collaborating with more than 70 communities across the country to conduct the Citizen Science Urban Heat Island campaigns. So it's absolutely exciting that we're doing this. Today is so exciting for Montgomery County, home to our National Weather Service headquarters and the NOAA headquarters. Go white shirts, right? We've got the NOAA folks here, so make sure to say hi to them. So it's exciting that we're doing this, and it's impressive that Montgomery County is doing this because it's just really important that we address the heat in our neighborhoods. NOAA's National Weather Service is co-lead of the National Integrated Heat Health Information System and provides weather forecasts, and we provide the outlooks for heat. You've probably seen that. And to help plan and to complete these urban heat island events. I mean, these campaigns just absolutely amazing to be able to do this. So I just look back and, you know, when I think about this, I was trying to think what to say. One thing I wanted to say, you know, when you think about dangerous weather, most people think tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, right? You see the damage. The number one killer? Say it out loud. Heat. It's heat. It's heat. It really is. So that's why these type of campaigns are incredibly important. So with climate change, we're seeing this increase in frequency of these heat events. We're seeing them more intense, and we're seeing them last longer. So this is an important campaign. And Montgomery County is already dealing with this. I mean, in 2020, who's from emergency management? I heard emergency management's here. So hey, good to see you all. So in 2020, remember the event, you know, from July 19th to the 21st, there was a heat emergency. Those type of things are going to increase in frequency. That's what's coming. So you look at the forecast from the Weather Forecast Office in Sterling. You combine that with the data that you have here today, combine that with emergency management, and that's where these warnings come out. The heat risk is going to increase, folks, and it already is. The number of 90-degree days in Montgomery County right now, it averages each year about 19.4 days above 90. We're going to look into the future. By 2050 or so, we can expect 67.9 days above 90 degrees. That's what's on the way. And that's using the high emission type of graph. So we can't do it alone. So this is an increasing thing. And the burden of this heat is not felt equally in our urban areas. That's why this campaign is so incredibly important, to look at who's most vulnerable to the heat. The cooler areas, the warmer areas. It's so important to be mapping this because it's disproportionate how the heat affects people. Does that make sense? So that's why this campaign is so incredibly important. The results of the mapping campaign, the data will be available on heat.gov. Brand new website. Visit it, heat.gov, multi-agency website. There's heat health information there. There's safety information there. There's forecasts from the Weather Service there. I encourage everybody to visit heat.gov. It's got so much information. It's amazing. So I applaud this effort. I'm so happy and honored to be here. It's so amazing to me. I applaud the volunteers. Think about it. The county executive, you said it's going to take all of us. It's going to take the volunteers, and it really is. It's going to take the citizens as we deal with this increasing threat. So we really need to think about that. I want to thank our science partner, Kappa Strategies, for providing the sensors. You can see the sensors back here, which is really amazing how we do this. And we're going to turn this into maps that we can use. Turn the science into action so we can use this to keep people safe. That's what it's all about. And let me tell you, it's going to take all of us to be a climate-ready nation. And if we work together, we can do it. Let's all be a climate-ready nation together. That's all I have. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Gretchen Goldman is currently serving at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy as the Assistant Director for Environmental Science, Engineering, Policy, and Justice. For a decade, Dr. Goldman has led research and advocacy efforts at the nexus of science and policy on topics including federal scientific integrity, fossil energy production, climate change, and environmental justice. Welcome, Dr. Goldman.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here, and I thank you all for standing out in the heat for this important cause. This is a really big deal to me personally. I'm an atmospheric scientist, a meteorologist by training, and I'm a Montgomery County resident, and I'm someone who really cares about equity and climate impacts in the county. And so this is a big deal for me, but this is also a really big deal for the nation. As you just heard Director Graham say, extreme heat kills. It's a dangerous weather extreme, and we need to do everything in our power to address it. And so I am so excited to be here today and for you all to join me in this. And today is about measuring that data so that we can really help assess and address climate change, environmental justice, and extreme heat in the county. And as you might know, that the extreme heat inequities are not distributed evenly. We see huge environmental injustices in where heat is located. And in fact, a lot of extreme heat we can trace back to the roots of redlining and racist policies that have enabled the same communities that are burdened with other kinds of environmental injustices to also be burdened with more extreme heat. And so that is something that we are up against, and that is a really important element of why we're here and what we need to tackle. And I want to also remind you that as part of today's campaign, this is also part of many of the broader Biden-Harris administration efforts around climate and environmental justice. This program, the Urban Heat Mapping program that's run out of NOAA and the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, is part of the administration's landmark Justice 40 program, which is working to provide 40% of benefits from climate and clean energy investments made by the federal government going towards disadvantaged communities. And this is also part of a lot of the administration's efforts around extreme heat solutions. You heard Director Graham talk about heat.gov, newly launched. There's a new OSHA rule, so the Occupational Safety and Health Administration rule, to look at the first ever federal heat standard. And there's efforts really going on across the entire federal government at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Health and Human Services, and the Department of Homeland Security to really look at what is the whole of government approach to addressing extreme heat in this country. And this is also part of the administration's broader efforts to work with communities directly to bring science, tools, and resources on extreme heat to better prepare the nation. And so there's money in the information in the Inflation Reduction Act to plant trees, to build and retrofit homes to be more ready to withstand extreme heat. And there's money for new and efficient and cheaper to operate heating and cooling systems in homes. And all of this, plus all of the resources within the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's lots of help on the way to help communities address extreme heat and climate impacts more broadly. But today is about you. This is your data in Montgomery County. This is community-driven science. And so communities now are in the best position to advance solutions locally. And so this is an opportunity for you to be empowered with that data to do what makes sense here. And we're lucky because there's lots of solutions to extreme heat that we already know about. And it's not just about planting trees. We can employ the latest science and technology that we know to address these extreme heat challenges. There's new research showing that shade from urban forms, so buildings like those around us, providing important shade and cooling mechanisms. There's innovative paint solutions being done to cool urban areas. And there's lots of ways that we can use social science and look at behaviors and what people really need in practice, from cooling centers strategies to other sorts of strategies we can employ to really look at what would on the ground reduce extreme heat exposure and reduce those health impacts that we see from that heat. And so as you're volunteering today, I want you to think about this critical role that you are playing, this role in empowering communities with this data for action, the role of addressing these longstanding inequities and environmental burdens that we see here and everywhere across the nation, and this role in helping our nation to tackle the climate crisis in a bigger way. And so thank you all for all of your time and your labor and your vehicles today in helping with this effort. Thank you to County Executive Elridge and Montgomery County for leading this effort. And thank you to NOAA and the National Integrated Heat Health Information System for helping run this campaign and enabling this community-driven effort. I'd now love to join you in going to measure some heat. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to close by thanking everyone who was able to join us today for our heat mapping campaign. I now invite you to stay for a sensor demonstration right here next to the vehicle and a send-off to our street scientists who are about to depart for their 3 p.m. routes. Thank you.
We are here today for Kappa's Heat Watch campaign, which is a partnership with NOAA, Kappa Strategies, and cities across the country and globally to map urban heat islands in the county and understand the real feel of the heat during the summertime. So this is the Kappa Heat Watch thermal sensor. So this device is a really innovative sensor to understand what the air actually feels like across the county. So we have the head, the neck, and the body. And in the head, it's a chamber that has a fan and a sensor that understands the temperature and the humidity as it comes through the chamber. And it communicates down the neck to the body, which then correlates it with a GPS. And every 1 second on the routes, the hour-long routes that are going around the county 3 times today, every 1 second, it's understanding the temperature, the humidity, and the location to be able to really precisely map, like at head height, what the heat feels like and what does it feel like when we're walking around in these urban heat islands. This initiative is really important for Montgomery County. We know where there's a lot of the urban heat islands already. We know what contributes to urban heat islands, like development, access to resources, like tree canopy, other social, historical factors. But the importance of this campaign to Montgomery County is we'll be able to see on a really micro level, residents across the county will be able to zoom in and see their house, their school, their walk to work, where that is, if it's in an urban heat island. And from a perspective of governance, we can share education, outreach during heat alerts to make sure people know that not only is it hot across the county, but they live in an urban heat island where it can be up to 20 degrees warmer than the rest of the area, which can be deadly. So it's really important for us in the county that we can make sure people are aware and can prevent heat-related illness. Montgomery County is an incredibly unique place to do mapping like this because you have really urban areas like here in Silver Spring, right across the border from DC, all the way up the county, but you also have areas that are urban that border the ag reserve. So you can see the disparities in action between, downtown Germantown and just a few miles away in the ag reserve where there's plush green spaces and the way that the climate, the microclimate in Germantown is dangerously hotter. Another thing that's really special in Montgomery County is that there's national and international attention that is focused around this area. We're the headquarters to NOAA, and so being able to work with the grant partners here and have NOAA scientists participate in this, come to tables and talk to Montgomery County residents about the importance of the science is something that's really unique and valuable here in the county. Almost immediately after just announcing that we had received this grant from NOAA, we had almost 200 volunteers sign up within the first 2 weeks. There was immediate interest, I think, from people that had just heard about it in the news, from friends, whenever the press release went out. And then within the month, we had almost 600 people sign up for this campaign with very little effort. People heard about the initiative. They wanted to participate in mapping urban heat islands in their own backyard, to the point that we had to turn people away. We had to say we don't actually have enough roles, enough routes to drive to collect this data. But it was still incredible. Today, we've had 115 people that are going to be driving in cars like this with the sensor around the county, mapping their own backyard. We correlated where the routes people are driving with where they live. But we also had a number of volunteers that got turned away, that didn't get selected to be able to participate, that still came out to support today, to see the sensors in action, to ask questions and educate their community about heat health. And it's really been spectacular to me and makes me really hopeful for the future of heat health in Montgomery County to see the amount of interest from the residents. So the sensor is incredibly innovative because it really brings the access to science to the average street scientist, like we're calling the volunteers. All they have to do is hook up the sensor to their car, turn it on so that the GPS is mapping, and then they drive, trying to stay under 35 miles an hour along the routes along the county. And while they're driving, every 1 second, it's collecting the data, and they don't have to do anything else that's special except drive on the roads that they drive on every day and being able to collect those maps and bring them back to the data that will help us make decisions in the county. It's incredibly accessible science, which is something that's really special.